Now, let's begin. I shifted uncomfortably in the passenger seat as Abby navigated her sedan through the December snow. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm against the fat flakes tumbling from the charcoal sky. We were heading to her parents' estate in Connecticut, 2 hours from our Brooklyn apartment, for what would be our third Christmas as a married couple. "You're doing that thing again," Abby said, without taking her eyes off the road. "What thing?" The jaw clench. "You always do it before we visit Dad." I relaxed my face, realizing she was right. Rod Robertson had that effect on me. From the moment I'd started dating his daughter 5 years ago, he'd made it clear I wasn't his first choice, or his second, or frankly, anywhere on his list of acceptable suitors for the Robertson family legacy. Just thinking about work, I lied. Abby reached over and squeezed my hand. "Michael, he's trying." "Really?" "Mom said he specifically asked her to make your favorite dessert." That actually surprised me. Rod Robertson, doing something considerate? The same man who'd forgotten to include me in the family Christmas card photo last year. Who still introduced me at charity galas as Abby's friend from the city. I was a research chemist at Meridian Pharmaceuticals, working on breakthrough treatments for degenerative diseases. Not exactly a trophy husband by Robertson standards, where success was measured in hedge fund returns and yacht lengths, but respectable enough. My father had been a high school chemistry teacher in Ohio before he passed, and my mother still lived in the same modest house where I grew up. The Robertsons came from old money, the kind that built libraries and had their names on hospital wings. "Maybe," I said, watching the bare trees blur past. Or maybe Sandra just felt bad about Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving had been a disaster. Rod had spent the entire meal talking about Harrison Drake, some Princeton legacy who'd recently made partner at his law firm. "Now, there's a young man with prospects," he'd said pointedly while Abby and I sat right there. "His father and I went to Yale together. The Drakes understand what it means to be part of a certain caliber of family." The Robertson estate appeared through the snow like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and sharp angles, with bare ivy climbing the walls. Lights blazed from every window. Rod's black Mercedes and Sandra's white Range Rover sat in the circular driveway alongside a silver Porsche I didn't recognize. "Whose car?" I asked as we parked. Abby's face tightened. "Probably Brandon's. Dad mentioned he might stop by." "Brandon Holland." "Of course. Abby's ex-boyfriend from college, the golden boy her father had actually approved of. Investment banker. Family in the Hamptons, the whole package. They dated for 2 years before Abby realized Brandon's charm was as deep as a puddle. He'd cheated on her with 3 different women. But Rod still spoke about him fondly, as if infidelity was just a minor character flaw among the elite. The front door opened before we could knock. Sandra Robertson stood in the entryway, wearing an elegant cream sweater and pearls, her silvering blonde hair pulled back in a neat chignon. She'd always been kind to me, in her quiet way a buffer between her husband's coldness and our forced family gatherings. "Michael, Abby, come in from the cold." She hugged us both, though I noticed her embrace lingered longer on her daughter. "Rod's in the study with Brandon. They're discussing some investment opportunity." "Mom, you said it would just be family tonight," Abby protested. Sandra's smile wavered. "You know how your father is. Brandon called this morning, and Rod insisted he join us. He won't stay long." The house smelled of pine and cinnamon, with a massive Christmas tree dominating the living room. Presents wrapped in expensive paper formed a mountain underneath. Everything was perfectly arranged, perfectly decorated, perfectly suffocating. Rod emerged from the study with Brandon in tow. At 62, Rod Robertson still carried himself like the corporate titan he'd been before retiring from Robertson Capital Management. Silver hair, steel gray eyes, a smile that never quite reached those eyes. He wore a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Brandon looked exactly the same as I remembered: tall, athletic build, that prep school confidence that came from never being told no. He shook my hand with just a bit too much pressure. "Michael, still at the pharmaceutical company?" His tone suggested I might be working the loading dock, still developing treatments that save lives. "You still moving rich people's money in circles?" Abby shot me a warning look, but I caught Sandra hiding a smile behind her wine glass. Now, Rod interjected, his voice carrying that patrician authority. "Let's have a civilized evening, shall we?" Brandon was just telling me about a promising biotech startup. Perhaps you'd have some insight, Michael. Given your field. The pause before Field spoke volumes. To Rod, I was playing at science while real men build empires. Dinner was the usual performance. Sandra had indeed made my favorite a chocolate torte, but the meal itself was an exercise in endurance. Brandon dominated the conversation with stories about his recent trip to Dubai, his new condo in Tribeca, his thoughts on the market. Rod hung on every word like Brandon was delivering the Sermon on the Mount. And that's when I told the Sheikh's advisor that if he wanted returns like that, he was in the wrong market entirely, Brandon concluded, laughing at his own story. Rod chuckled along. That's the kind of boldness that builds wealth. Don't you think, Michael? I was about to respond when Abby's hand found mine under the table, squeezing hard. A warning. Instead, I smiled thinly. I think boldness without ethics is just recklessness. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ethics, Rod repeated, as if tasting something bitter. Yes, well, men who prioritize ethics over success rarely have much of either. Rod, Sandra said softly, but he waved her off. I'm simply stating facts, darling. Michael, no offense, but you're 34 years old. Still renting in Brooklyn, working a salary position, driving a 10-year-old Honda. Where's the ambition? Where's the drive to build something meaningful? I am building something meaningful, I said, keeping my voice even. My research team just achieved a breakthrough in treating early-onset Parkinson's. We're 6 months from clinical trials. That means people who were facing a devastating diagnosis might have hope. How lovely, Rod said dismissively. And what does that pay? 70,000? 80? Dad, stop it, Abby said, her voice sharp. I'm just trying to understand what my daughter saw in you. Rod continued, his words growing sharper. She could have had anyone. Brandon here was absolutely devoted to her. Brandon had the decency to look uncomfortable. Mr. Robertson, I don't think you cheated on me. Abby cut in, her voice icy. With 3 women that I knew about. Ancient history. Rod waved it away. Young men make mistakes. It's part of growing up. What matters is pedigree, potential, the right connections. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Thank you for dinner, Sandra. It was delicious, but I think we should go. Sit down, Michael, Rod commanded. I'm not finished. Actually, you are. I met his gaze steadily. I've spent 3 years listening to you diminish me, dismiss my work, and disrespect my marriage to your daughter. I've stayed quiet because Abby asked me to. But I'm done being your verbal punching bag. For a moment, genuine surprise crossed Rod's face. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in his own home. Then, his expression hardened into something colder. You're quite right, he said, standing as well. You should leave. But Abby stays. This is her family, her home. You're just temporary. Michael is my husband, Abby said, standing beside me. We're leaving together. Abby, don't be dramatic, Sandra pleaded. It's Christmas Eve. The next few minutes were tense. Abby gathered our coats while Rod retreated to his study in stony silence. Sandra apologized repeatedly, tears in her eyes. Brandon slipped out quietly, probably realizing his presence had been gasoline on an already burning fire. We were at the front door when Rod reappeared, carrying a bottle of wine. Wait, he said, his voice different now, subdued, almost conciliatory. Michael, I may have been too harsh. The holidays always make me nostalgic for when Abby was young, before she grew up and moved away. It's no excuse, but I'm asking you to accept my apology. He held out the bottle. It was a 1,982 Chateau Margaux, the label pristine, the wine itself worth easily $2,000. I was saving this for a special occasion. Rod continued. I'd like you to have it. Consider it a peace offering and a proper Christmas gift. I should have acknowledged your wedding properly. This is me trying to make amends. I stared at the bottle, then at Rod. His expression seemed genuine, humble even. Sandra watched hopefully from the doorway. Dad, Abby said softly, surprised. Please, Rod said, pressing the bottle into my hands. Let's not end the evening on such a sour note. I spoke out of turn. You love my daughter, and she loves you. That should be enough for an old fool like me. The bottle felt heavy in my hands, both physically and symbolically. An 82 Margot was one of the greatest vintages of the 20th century. This was no small gesture. "Thank you," I said finally. "This is very generous. Enjoy it with Abby. Toast to a better relationship between us in the new year." Rod shook my hand, his grip firm but not aggressive this time. "Drive safely. The snow's getting worse." The drive back to Brooklyn was quiet. Abby dozed against the window while I navigated the slick highways, my mind replaying the evening. Rod's sudden change of heart fell off, but maybe I was being paranoid. People could change. Maybe he'd finally realized how his behavior affected his daughter. We arrived home past midnight. Our apartment was a modest one-bedroom in Park Slope. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Abby went straight to bed while I put the bottle of Margot in our small wine rack, next to the 3 bottles of grocery store red we usually drink. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke early and made coffee. The wine bottle sat on the counter where I'd moved it, catching the winter light. It really was a beautiful bottle. I'd read about the 82 Margot. Critics called it perfection in a bottle, with notes of cassis, cedar, and tobacco. It was meant to be drunk on special occasions, with someone you loved. I decided to surprise Abby. She'd been so stressed lately with work and her father's constant disapproval. A romantic dinner tonight, just the two of us, with this incredible wine, a way to end Christmas on a high note after yesterday's disaster. I texted her while she was still asleep, making something special for dinner tonight. We're something nice. I love you. The phone rang at 9 a.m. Rod's name flashed on the screen. "Michael," he said, his voice tight. "I hope I'm not calling too early. I just wanted to check. Did you open the wine yet? The Margot?" Something in his tone made my stomach clench. "No." "Why? When are you planning to open it?" "Tonight, actually. I'm making dinner for Abby." "Why do you ask?" Silence on the other end, long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. "Rod? Don't," he said, the word coming out strangled. "Don't open it. I made a mistake. That bottle, it's not the wine I meant to give you. I grabbed the wrong one from the cellar. It's actually a bottle I was going to discard. There's something wrong with it, possibly spoiled. I need you to bring it back so I can give you the right one." My hand tightened on the phone. I was a chemist. I understood wine chemistry, fermentation, oxidation. A properly stored 82 Margot didn't just spoil. And Rod Robertson, meticulous in everything, didn't make mistakes about his wine collection. "That's odd," I said slowly. The seal looked intact. The storage seemed perfect. "Just trust me," Rod insisted. "It's not safe to drink. When can you drive it back?" "We're actually about to head out," I lied smoothly. "But I'll drop it off later this week. Is that okay?" Another pause. "Where are you going?" "Just out. Christmas Day plans." "Why?" "I really need that bottle back today, Michael. It's important." "Is it spoiled, or isn't it?" "Because you're acting like it's dangerous." "I'm simply being cautious. You know how expensive that wine is. I'd hate for you to waste it on a dinner when it might not be drinkable." I walked to the window, looking out at the quiet Brooklyn street. Fresh snow blanketed the cars. A family walked past. Kids in new winter coats. Everything looked normal, peaceful, but my chemist's mind was already working through possibilities. None of them good. "I'll tell you what," I said. "Why don't you come pick it up? Save us the drive. I'm in Connecticut. That's a 2-hour drive each way." "Then, I guess it'll have to wait until later this week. We're leaving now. Merry Christmas, Rod." I hung up before he could respond. Abby emerged from the bedroom in her pajamas, yawning. "Was that Dad?" "Yeah. He wanted to know if we'd opened the wine yet." "That's strange." She padded to the kitchen and poured herself coffee. "Why would he care?" "He said he gave us the wrong bottle. Wants it back." Abby rolled her eyes. "That sounds like Dad. Probably realized it was worth more than he thought and regretted being generous. Just give it back. I don't want to deal with another fight." She went to shower, leaving me alone with the bottle. I picked it up, examining it under the light. The label was authentic. I'd researched enough about vintage wines to spot a fake. The fill level was perfect. The cork looked good through the glass. Everything appeared legitimate. But Rod's panic, his insistence, the way his voice had cracked when I said we were drinking it tonight, that wasn't normal. That was fear. I thought about last night's dinner. His sudden apology after months of hostility. The expensive gift. So, out of character. The way he'd pressed the bottle into my hands, insisting we drink it together. Abby and I. My phone buzzed. A text from Rod. I'm heading to the city now. Don't touch that bottle. I'm serious, Michael. Another text. Seconds later. Please? I stared at the bottle for a long moment. Then I went to my home office and pulled out my portable testing kit, a small device I sometimes use for preliminary work analysis. It couldn't do a full toxicology screening, but it could detect certain anomalies. Using a wine opener, I carefully extracted a small sample through the cork without fully opening the bottle. The wine was indeed a deep ruby red, exactly what you'd expect from an aged Bordeaux. I put a drop on the test strip. The strip turned black. My hands started shaking. Black meant the presence of heavy metals or toxic compounds. This wine wasn't just spoiled, it was poisoned. Someone had tried to kill me, and that someone was my father-in-law. But the timing of his call meant he'd changed his mind or realized something, which meant the bathroom shower was still running. Abby would be out any minute, asking about dinner plans. The dinner I'd been planning, the romantic meal, the wine I was going to serve her, Rod's daughter. I looked at the test strip again, my medical and chemical knowledge running through possibilities. Heavy metals, possibly arsenic or thallium, both odorless and tasteless when mixed with wine. Both lethal in the right doses. Both taking hours to show symptoms, giving the poisoner time to establish an alibi. The phone rang again. Rod, I answered. Did you drink it? His voice was barely above a whisper. Please tell me you didn't drink it. No, I said, but I was about to. Tonight, with Abby. A sound came through the phone, something between a sob and a gasp of relief. Thank God. Thank God. Michael, you need to destroy that bottle. Pour it down the drain, throw it away, but don't let anyone drink it. Why? I asked, my voice cold. What's in it, Rod? Silence. What did you do? I can explain, he started. You poisoned me. Your Christmas gift was murder wrapped in a bow. I thought, his voice cracked. I changed my mind. That's why I called. I couldn't go through with it. The shower shut off. I had maybe 5 minutes before Abby came out. Stay on the line, I said quietly. Don't hang up. Don't move. Just listen. I could hear him breathing, ragged and panicked. Last night you gave me poison wine. This morning you called to stop me from drinking it, but only after you'd had all night to think about it. To plan your alibi. To prepare your story. The only reason you're panicking now is because I told you I was giving it to Abby. No, that's not. You were willing to kill me, but not your daughter. That's the line you won't cross. Heavy breathing on the other end. Then, you don't understand. You're not good enough for her. You're dragging down the family, bringing us into mediocrity. The Robertson name means something. I was protecting our legacy. There it was. The truth, ugly and bare. So you decided to murder me. I was going to make it look like an accident. A heart attack, maybe. Some of these poisons, they mimic natural causes. You're young and healthy, but these things happen. Abby would have mourned. Yes, but she would have moved on. Found someone appropriate. Brandon's been asking about her. My free hand clenched into a fist. You're insane. I'm a father protecting his family's future. Rod's voice rose. Do you know what it's like, watching your daughter throw away her potential? She could have had everything: the right marriage, the right connections, the right life. Instead, she chose you, a nobody from nowhere with nothing to offer, except love, and a future that's actually hers to choose. Love, Rod spat. Love doesn't pay for country club memberships. Love doesn't open doors. Love doesn't build dynasties. No, I said, but apparently it does inspire attempted murder. The bedroom door opened. Abby appeared in a towel, her wet hair dripping on the hardwood. Who are you talking to? She asked. I looked at her, my wife, the woman I'd built a life with, who her father had been willing to turn into a widow to satisfy his own ego and obsession with social standing. Your father, I said. We're having a very important conversation about family. Her expression shifted to confusion, then concern as she registered something in my face. Michael, what's wrong? Into the phone, I said. We'll be there in 2 hours. Don't leave your house. Don't call anyone. We're going to have this conversation face to face, and then we're going to decide what happens next. Michael, Please. I hung up. Abby stood frozen, water pooling at her feet. What's going on? I picked up the wine bottle and the black test strip. Get dressed. We need to talk in the car. And then, we're going to Connecticut. Why? What did Dad do? I met her eyes. He tried to kill me. And when he thought I'd given the poison to you instead, he called to stop you from drinking it. That's how much he values my life compared to yours. Her face went pale. That's not funny. I'm not joking. I showed her the test strip. This wine he gave us? It's contaminated with heavy metals, probably arsenic. Enough to kill. Made to look like a heart attack or natural causes. He admitted it on the phone just now. Abby's legs seemed to give out. She sat heavily on the couch, staring at the bottle like it was a snake. No. Dad wouldn't, he can't. He did. And now we're going to find out why, and exactly what he was planning. And then, I paused, my own mind racing ahead to possibilities. Plans forming. Then we're going to make sure he never threatens us or anyone else again. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. He really tried to kill you? He really did. Because you're not rich enough? Not connected enough? Because I'm not the son-in-law he wanted. Because I'm a nobody from nowhere with nothing to offer. I knelt beside her. But here's the thing, Abby. I'm a chemist who specializes in compounds and their effects on the human body. Your father just picked a fight with exactly the wrong person. Her tears stopped. Something hardened in her expression. What are you going to do? I thought about Rod Robertson and his mansion, panicking because his perfect murder had gone wrong, because his daughter might have died instead of his unwanted son-in-law. I thought about 3 years of subtle insults and dismissals, of being treated like I was beneath their notice, of being called temporary. I'm going to do what I do best, I said. I'm going to apply scientific rigor to a problem until I find the solution. And Rod Robertson is about to become a case study in what happens when you underestimate the people you consider beneath you. Abby wiped her eyes and stood up. I'm coming with you. Are you sure? He's my father. I need to hear this from him. I need to look him in the eye and hear him admit what he tried to do to you to us. Her voice was steel. And then I need to help you make sure he pays for it. I kissed her forehead. Get dressed. We have a long drive ahead of us. As she went back to the bedroom, I carefully sealed the wine bottle in a plastic bag and placed it in my testing kit. Evidence. Proof. Ammunition for what was coming. Rod Robertson thought he was protecting his legacy. He was about to learn that some legacies deserved to burn. The snow had stopped by the time we loaded into the car, leaving the city white and pristine under a bright winter sun. The roads were clear enough for good time. I spent the drive telling Abby everything: the test results, Rod's confession, his reasoning, his panic when he thought she might drink it. She listened in silence, her face growing harder with each revelation. He was going to let me become a widow, she finally said. He was going to make me grieve, attend your funeral, all while knowing he killed you. What kind of monster does that to their own daughter? The kind who values appearances over people, legacy over love. I'll testify, she said firmly. We go to the police. I'll tell them everything. We could do that, I agreed. But Rod Robertson has connections. Expensive lawyers. Friends in high places. He'd probably argue temporary insanity. Get some psychiatrist to say he was having a mental health crisis. Serve minimal time in a comfortable facility. Then what do we do? I thought about the test strip, the wine, the phone confession I'd recorded. We use what I know best. Chemistry, psychology. His own methods turned back on him. I don't understand. You will. I kept my eyes on the road. But first, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. How long he's been planning this. Whether we were the first targets. That last part made Abby suck in a sharp breath. You think he's done this before? I think a man who casually poisons someone and calls it protecting the family legacy didn't just wake up one morning with that idea. This is calculated, premeditated, which means it might be a pattern. We pulled into the Robertson estate at noon. Rod's Mercedes sat in the driveway, and through the windows I could see him pacing in his study. Sandra's Range Rover was gone, probably at church, her usual Sunday routine. Good. This conversation needed to happen without Sandra present. At least at first. Rod opened the door before we could knock. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight, unshaven. Still in yesterday's clothes, his eyes red-rimmed. Abby, he said, reaching for her. She stepped back. Don't. The single word, landed like a slap. Rod's hand dropped. "Inside," I said. "Your study, now." We followed him into the wood-paneled room lined with law books and family photos. Rod collapsed into his leather chair, while Abby and I remained standing. I placed my testing kit on his desk, the sealed wine bottle clearly visible. "Tell her," I said, "everything you told me on the phone. Look at your daughter and explain why you tried to murder her husband." Rod's hands trembled. "Abby, sweetheart, I made a terrible mistake. Not a mistake, a choice. You chose to poison Michael. Why? Because he's not right for you." The words burst out. "You're a Robertson. Our family has maintained a certain standard for 6 generations. We don't marry down. We don't dilute the bloodline with what?" I interrupted. "Middle-class scientists, people who work for a living, be specific, Rod. With people who will drag us into obscurity." He stood up, his old arrogance flashing through the fear. "My grandfather built Robertson Capital from nothing. My father expanded it. I grew it into one of the most respected names in Connecticut. And you want my daughter to live in a rental apartment in Brooklyn, scraping by on a researcher's salary, watching her friends jet off to Monaco while she shops at discount stores." "I have everything I want," Abby said quietly. "You don't know what you want. You're 31 years old, still naive about how the world works. I'm protecting you from yourself. By committing murder," I said flatly. Rod slumped back into his chair. "I wasn't. I was going to make it painless. Quick. You'd have gone to sleep and never woken up. Abby would have mourned, yes, but she's young. She'd recover. I'd have introduced her to appropriate suitors, men who could give her the life she deserves. Men like Brandon," Abby said, her voice dripping with disgust. "The cheater you still fawn over because his family has the right last name. Brandon made mistakes, but he has potential. He has connections. He has nothing I want. But you were willing to kill Michael to give me no choice." Rod looked at his daughter with something like desperation. "I'm your father. Everything I do is for your benefit. Can't you see that?" "No," she said simply. "All I see is a man so obsessed with appearances that he became a would-be murderer." I pulled out my phone and played the recording from this morning. Rod's voice filled the study. I was going to make it look like an accident. A heart attack, maybe. Some of these poisons, they mimic natural causes. When it finished, I said, "That's a confession. Recorded with your full knowledge you were on the phone with me. Admissible in court." Rod's face drained of color. "You can't." "I can. I have the poisoned wine, tested and documented. I have your confession. I have Abby as a witness to your hatred of me. Any prosecutor would jump at this case." "Please." Rod's voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking clearly. The holidays, the stress, seeing you two together and realizing my little girl is really gone." I snapped. "Temporary insanity. Any jury would understand." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe they'd see a calculated attempt at murder by a wealthy man who thought he was above consequences. Want to roll those dice?" "What do you want?" Rod asked, his pride finally breaking completely. "Money? I'll double whatever you're making. Triple it. You want a house? A car? Just name your price, and this all goes away." I looked at this man who'd spent 3 years treating me like garbage, who'd tried to kill me, who even now was trying to buy his way out of accountability. "I don't want your money," I said. "I want the truth. All of it." Rod looked confused. "I told you the truth." "No. You told me about this attempt. I want to know if there were others." The silence that followed was deafening. "Michael," Abby whispered. "You can't be serious." But I was watching Rod's face, and I saw a flicker of something. Fear, yes, but also calculation. He was deciding what to say, how much to reveal. "There were others," I said, not a question. "Weren't there?" Rod's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone again and pulled up a news article I'd found during the drive. "Abby, did you know your mother was married before she met your father?" She frowned. "What? No. Mom's only been married once. That's what the family says. But I did some digging. Sandra Woods married a man named James Davison when she was 23. He died 6 months later of sudden heart failure. No autopsy was performed because the family doctor ruled it natural causes. Sandra inherited his estate, nothing huge, but enough, and met Rod 2 years later. Rod had gone very still. And before that, I continued. Your grandmother's first husband, your father's stepfather, died of similar circumstances. Sudden illness, rapid decline, death within days. Also ruled natural causes. This is absurd, Rod said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Or is poisoning inconvenient family members a Robertson tradition? Something passed down along with the money and the name? Abby looked between us, horror growing on her face. Dad, tell him he's wrong. Rod said nothing. The wine you gave me, I pressed. Where did you learn to prepare it? How did you know exactly what compound to use? What dose would kill without raising suspicion? You don't understand, Rod finally said. Some families maintain their status through business savvy. Others through politics. The Robertsons maintain ours through pruning, removing elements that threaten our position. It's not cruelty. It's necessity. You're admitting to multiple murders, I said, unable to believe what I was hearing. Not murders. Strategic removals. And always with the family's best interests in mind. Rod looked at me with something almost like pity. You were a mistake, Michael. I should have handled you more delicately, found another way, but I saw how Abby looked at you, how serious it was getting, and I knew I was running out of time. So I used the methods my father taught me, that his father taught him. Quick, clean, untraceable. Except you called me, I said. You panicked. Why? For the first time, Rod's eyes welled with tears. Because I'm not my father or his father. I thought I could do what needed to be done. But when I woke up this morning and realized Abby might drink that wine, might die because of my solution, I couldn't bear it. I'm many things, but I'm not a murderer of my own blood. Just blood you consider beneath you, Abby said, her voice hollow. I was protecting you. You were protecting your ego. She was shaking now. How many people, Dad? How many people did our family kill? Rod looked away. I don't know all of them. My father didn't share everything. But in my lifetime, 3 before you. Michael, Sandra's first husband, who was going to go public about some financial irregularities he discovered in my company, couldn't let that happen. My first business partner, who wanted to dissolve our firm and take his clients too much money at stake. And your uncle, Uncle Paul? Abby gasped. You said he died of cancer. He did. Induced cancer. Certain compounds, administered over months, can trigger cellular degradation indistinguishable from natural cancer. Paul was threatening to expose some questionable dealings. Had to be handled. I felt sick. This wasn't just attempted murder. This was a legacy of death, a family secret written in poison and lies. We're going to the police, Abby said firmly. You can't. Rod stood up, some of his old authority returning. I'm your father, Abby. Your blood. The Robertsons don't air their dirty laundry in public. We handle things internally. Like you handled Michael, like you handled Uncle Paul. I made mistakes, Rod admitted, but going to the police destroys everything. Our name, our reputation, our family's future. Is that really what you want? To be known as the daughter of a serial killer? To have photographers camped outside your door, reporters dissecting every aspect of our lives? He was playing his last card, and it was a good one. The scandal would be enormous. Generational wealth built on murder. The social pages would have a field day. I don't care, Abby said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. You should care, Rod pressed. Because it won't just affect us. It'll affect you too. Your job, your friends, your entire life. People will always whisper about you. Wonder if you knew, if you were complicit. Is that justice? Destroying your own future to punish me? He's right, I said quietly. Abby spun to me. Michael, you can't be serious. He tried to kill you. I know. But he's also right that going public destroys you too. And I won't let that happen. Rod looked relieved. Thank you, Michael. I knew you were reasonable. I didn't say you were getting away with it. I interrupted. I said we're not going to the police. What I'm going to do is much more personal. The relief vanished from Rod's face. What does that mean? I pulled out my phone and showed him a text I'd sent from the car. While we were driving here, I contacted an old colleague from my pharmaceutical days. Dr. Henry Hughes, brilliant toxicologist, specializes in rare compounds. I sent him the composition data from your wine. So Dr. Hughes is also a consultant for the FBI. Has been for years, and he's very interested in the compound you used. Especially once I mentioned it might be connected to other suspicious deaths in a wealthy Connecticut family. Rod's face went white. You had no right. I had every right. You see, I didn't tell him your name. I didn't give him any identifying information. But I did tell him that if something were to happen to me or my wife, he should take that data and everything else I'd compiled and go directly to the authorities. It's an insurance policy. You're blackmailing me. I'm insuring our survival. And now we're going to discuss terms. Rod sank back into his chair. What do you want? First, you're going to transfer $2 million into a trust fund for Abby, completely independent of you or your estate. That trust will be managed by a third party and will ensure her financial security regardless of what happens to the Robertson family fortune. That's non-negotiable. Second, you're going to draft a full confession. Everything. Every person you've killed. How you did it. Why. You'll sign it, have it notarized, and put it in a safety deposit box. I'll have the only other key. You want me to put a signed confession in writing? I want insurance that you'll never come after us again. That confession guarantees it. Because if anything happens to me or Abby, accident, illness, anything at all, that confession gets mailed to the FBI, the Connecticut State Police, and every major newspaper in the country. Rod's hands were shaking again. That's my entire life. Everything I've built. Should have thought of that before you tried to murder me. Third, you're going to establish a foundation in Uncle Paul's name, funded with $5 million, dedicated to cancer research. Public, very visible, with you as the figurehead. Every year, you'll give speeches about your beloved brother and how much you miss him. That's cruel. That's appropriate. You'll spend the rest of your life pretending to honor a man you murdered, knowing that every smile for the cameras is built on a lie. Fourth and finally, you never speak to me again. Ever. You attend family functions when absolutely necessary. You're civil to me in public, but we are not family. You are a stranger I happen to share Christmas dinners with on occasion. And if I refuse, then Dr. Hughes gets a name with his data, and you spend the rest of your life in prison. Your choice. Rod looked at Abby. You're going to let him do this? Blackmail your own father? You tried to kill my husband, Abby said coldly. You murdered my uncle. You murdered at least 3 other people. Michael's being more generous than you deserve. Abby, please. Don't. She held up a hand. I loved you. I spent my whole life trying to earn your approval, trying to be the daughter you wanted. But you're a monster. And monsters don't get love. They get cages. Michael's cage is just more comfortable than the one you deserve. Rod sat in silence for a long moment. Then, finally he nodded. I'll do it. Your terms. All of them. Good, I said. We'll start with the confession. Now. You're going to write it all down, every detail, while we watch. And then we're going to the bank. For the next 3 hours, Rod wrote. Page after page. Detailing decades of murder, manipulation, and family secrets. Abby cried while reading parts of it. I cataloged each admission, cross-referencing with news articles and family stories. When he finally finished, we had a 14-page document of systematic murder. Rod's hand trembled as he signed each page. The bank opens tomorrow, he said. We can arrange the trust and the foundation then. We'll be here at 9. I confirmed. And Rod, if you try to run, if you try to warn anyone, if you do anything except exactly what we've agreed to, that confession goes public immediately. Understood? He nodded, looking 100 years old. We left him there in his study, surrounded by the trappings of the wealth he'd killed to maintain. Sandra came home as we were leaving, confused by our grim faces and Rod's broken expression, but we simply said there'd been a family discussion and we'd all agreed on some new arrangements. In the car, Abby finally broke down completely. I pulled over and held her while she sobbed. He's my father, she kept saying. My father. I know. How do I live with this? How do I look at him and not see a killer? You don't, I said gently. You see exactly what he is. And you decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want with that person. But you're not responsible for his choices. You're only responsible for yours. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. I want him to pay. Really pay. Not just money or fake foundations. I want him to hurt. He will. I promised. Every day for the rest of his life. He'll know his daughter knows what he is. He'll attend dinners and smile and pretend, all while knowing he's lost you forever. For a man like Rod Robertson, whose entire identity is built on family legacy and respect, that's the worst punishment imaginable. And if that's not enough, I thought about the confession in my bag, the insurance policy that would follow Rod for the rest of his life. Then we'll revisit our options. But for now, we've neutered him. He can't hurt us without destroying himself. The next morning, we met Rod at his bank. He looked like he hadn't slept, but he was coherent and compliant. By noon, the trust fund was established, irrevocable, and protected. By 3 p.m., the foundation was created, initial funding transferred, bylaws written. The bank manager congratulated Rod on his generosity and commitment to cancer research. Rod smiled and said it was what his brother would have wanted. I watched him lie with practiced ease and felt no sympathy. This was his life, now a performance of virtue built on a foundation of murder. A week later, the first cancer research grant was awarded in Paul Robertson's name. Local news covered it. Rod gave an emotional speech about his beloved brother. Abby and I watched from the back of the room. "He's good at this," she whispered. "Almost makes you believe he actually cared. That's what makes him dangerous," I replied. "He's had decades to perfect the mask." But I could see cracks in that mask. The way Rod's smile never reached his eyes. The tension in his shoulders. The moment our eyes met across the room and he flinched. He was trapped in a cage of his own making, and he knew it. 3 months later, Sandra called. Rod had developed stress-related health issues, high blood pressure, insomnia, early signs of an ulcer. His doctor recommended he step back from his responsibilities. "He keeps asking about you and Abby," Sandra said, her voice worried. "He seems afraid. Did something happen between you three that I should know about?" "Just a clarification of boundaries," I said carefully. "Rod and I came to an understanding about our relationship. He won't tell me what you discussed. Says it's between you men." "It is. But Sandra, you should know Abby and I are happy. We have everything we need. Tell Rod he can stop worrying about us. We're fine." I hung up and looked at Abby, who was preparing for her day at the museum where she worked. She'd been promoted recently, was thriving in ways she never had when trying to meet her father's impossible standards. "Dad's falling apart," I told her. She paused, her expression conflicted. "Good," she finally said. "Let him feel what it's like to be afraid." 6 months after our confrontation, Rod Robertson announced his retirement from public life. The foundation would continue under professional management. He was stepping back to focus on his health and family. The announcement made the society pages. Friends threw him a retirement party. Everyone said how much they'd miss his presence at various charity events. Abby and I attended the party because absence would have raised questions. Rod saw us across the room and his face went pale. We stayed exactly 15 minutes, just long enough to be seen, before leaving. "Do you think he'll try again?" Abby asked as we drove home. "No," I said. "He knows what happens if he does. And more importantly, I don't think he has it in him anymore." We broke something in him that day. His power. His certainty. Men like Rod operate from a position of absolute confidence in their superiority. We showed him he's not untouchable. That's worse than any prison sentence for someone like him. A year later, we moved to a brownstone we purchased in Brooklyn. The down payment came from Abby's trust fund. Rod never asked where we got the money. At Christmas, we attended the Robertson family dinner. Rod was gray-haired now, noticeably thinner. He shook my hand with a grip that trembled. "Michael," he said quietly. "How are you?" "Thriving," I replied. "My research is moving to clinical trials. We think we found a breakthrough treatment." Something flickered in his eyes. Was it pride? Regret? Fear? I couldn't tell. That's wonderful." "Really?" He looked at Abby. "And you, sweetheart?" "Happy," she said simply. "Really? Genuinely happy." He nodded, his eyes wet. "Good. That's all I ever wanted." The lie hung in the air between us. Unspoken, but understood. Later, as we drove home through the snow, Abby said, "I almost felt sorry for him tonight." "Almost?" Then I remembered Uncle Paul, and your voice on the phone that morning, telling me what he'd tried to do. And the feeling passed. I reached over and took her hand. "You're allowed to grieve who you thought he was, but not who he actually is." Never that. We drove in comfortable silence, the lights of the city appearing through the snow. Behind us, in his Connecticut mansion, Rod Robertson sat alone in his study, surrounded by photographs of a family legacy built on lies and death. He had everything he'd ever wanted: the money, the name, the reputation, everything except the two things that actually mattered: his daughter's love and his own peace of mind. I'd given him exactly what he deserved, a lifetime sentence disguised as freedom, where every smile was agony and every accomplishment was hollow. Some cages have bars, others have picture windows and leather furniture. But they're still cages, and Rod Robertson would never escape his. 2 years after that Christmas morning phone call, my research team published our breakthrough findings. The treatment we developed showed a 73% success rate in early-stage Parkinson's patients. My name was on the paper. News outlets covered it. I was invited to speak at conferences. One invitation came from a medical ethics symposium. The topic: the responsibility of scientists to use their knowledge for good, not harm. I accepted. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of researchers and medical professionals, I spoke about the dual nature of chemical knowledge, how the same understanding that heals can also hurt, and how the choice between them defines us. I once knew a man, I said, who used his knowledge of chemistry to hurt others. He justified it as protecting his interests, his legacy. But in the end, that knowledge didn't protect him. It destroyed him, because he forgot the fundamental truth: science without ethics is just power without purpose, and power without purpose eventually consumes itself. After the speech, a young researcher approached me. "That man you mentioned," she said, "did he ever face justice?" I thought about Rod Robertson, about the confession locked away, about the foundation giving grants in the name of a man he murdered, about the prison of his own making. "Yes," I said, "he did, just not the kind you might expect." "Is that enough?" she pressed. "Is justice without prison really justice?" I considered the question carefully. I think justice is about proportionality and prevention. That man can never hurt anyone again. He lives every day knowing what he did and what he's lost because of it. Is it perfect? No, but it's appropriate. She nodded thoughtfully and moved on. That night, I came home to Abby. She was in our home office, working on a grant proposal. The house we bought had enough space for both of us to work from home when needed. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours, bought with clean money, filled with chosen love rather than obligated pretense. "How was the conference?" she asked. "Good. Talked about ethics." She smiled slightly. "Appropriate topic for you." Someone asked if a certain chemist I mentioned ever faced justice. "What did you tell them?" "That he did, in his own way." Abby set down her pen. "Do you ever regret not going to the police? Not putting him in an actual cell?" It was a question she asked sometimes, usually late at night when the weight of knowing her father's true nature became too heavy. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I think about what it would have done to you, to Sandra, to everyone whose lives would have been destroyed by the scandal. And I remember that justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about protection and prevention." "He's isolated now," Abby said. "No real friends, no influence, just that big empty house and his guilt. And the knowledge that his daughter knows what he is. That has to be worse than any prison cell." "Do you think he's sorry? Really sorry?" "I think he's sorry he got caught. Sorry he lost you. Sorry he's not the man he thought he was." "Whether he's sorry for the actual murders?" I shrugged. "I don't know if men like Rod Robertson have that kind of moral reckoning." My phone rang. Sandra's name on the screen. "Michael," she said, her voice shaky. "It's Rod. He's had a stroke. They're taking him to Greenwich Hospital. Can you and Abby come?" We drove to Connecticut in silence, through the same roads we'd traveled 2 years ago with poisoned wine and righteous anger. The hospital was modern and efficient, all white walls and hushed urgency. Sandra met us in the waiting room. She'd aged since I last saw her, new lines around her eyes and mouth. "They say it's serious," she told us. "Massive stroke. They're running tests, but the doctor said." Her voice broke. "He might not wake up." Abby held her mother while I processed this information. Rod Robertson, the man who'd tried to kill me, who'd murdered multiple people, who'd terrorized our lives, reduced to a body in a hospital bed, tubes and monitors keeping him tethered to life. "Can we see him?" Abby asked. Sandra nodded. "Room 412. But he's not conscious. They don't know if he can hear us." The room was dim, quiet except for the steady beep of heart monitors. Rod lay in the bed looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. His face was slack, half of it drooping from the stroke. His hair, fully white now, was thin against the pillow. Sandra went to his bedside, taking his hand. "Rod, sweetheart, Abby and Michael are here." No response. Just the machines, breathing for him, monitoring his failing body. Abby approached slowly. She looked down at her father for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I don't know what to feel," she whispered. "You don't have to know," I said. "There's no right way to feel about this." The doctor came in, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with kind eyes. "Mrs. Robertson, I need to discuss your husband's condition." They stepped out, leaving me alone with Abby and the man who'd tried to murder me. I walked to the bedside, looking down at Rod Robertson. 2 years ago, he'd been powerful, threatening, willing to kill to maintain his version of order. Now, he was this helpless, broken, dependent on machines and medical intervention. "I should feel vindicated," I said quietly, "seeing you like this, but I don't. I just feel tired." Abby joined me, both of us standing over her father's still form. "He looks peaceful," she said, "like he's finally free of whatever drove him to do those things. Maybe he is, or maybe he's trapped in there, conscious but unable to move or speak, thinking about everything he did. Which would you prefer?" I considered that. "I prefer he live, wake up, face what he's become with full awareness. Quick exits feel too much like mercy he doesn't deserve." The doctor returned with Sandra. "The stroke caused significant brain damage," she explained. "If he survives, and that's a big if, he'll likely have severe impairment. No motor function on his left side, possible aphasia, definitely requiring full-time care." "For how long?" Sandra asked. "For the rest of his life." "I'm sorry." Sandra sank into a chair, the weight of it all finally breaking through her composure. Abby went to her, holding her while she cried. I looked at the doctor. "What are his chances of survival?" 50-50 in the next 48 hours. If he makes it past that, it drops to the quality of life discussion. And what quality of life are we talking about? She met my eyes, and I saw she understood what I was really asking. Minimal. He might recognize faces, respond to stimulus, but he wouldn't be the man he was. He'd be entirely dependent on others for every basic function. Rod Robertson, the patriarch, the controller, the murderer reduced to someone who needed help eating, bathing, existing. Unable to maintain the facade of respectability he'd killed to protect. Unable to control anything, including his own body. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Thank you, doctor," I said. She nodded and left. I pulled Abby aside while Sandra sat with her unconscious husband. "What are you thinking?" Abby asked. "I'm thinking about that confession in the safety deposit box. About the insurance policy we created. What about it? If Rod dies, that confession becomes less relevant. Dead men can't threaten us. But if he lives like this, impaired and dependent, he's also not a threat. So, either way, we're safe. Either way, we're free." Abby looked back at her father. "Is it wrong that I want him to live? Not for him, but because I want him to experience what it's like to be powerless, to need help for everything, to lose all that control he valued so much? I don't know if it's wrong, but I understand it." We stayed for 2 hours before heading home. Sandra wanted to stay the night, keeping vigil even though Rod showed no signs of awareness. The drive back was quieter than our previous emergency trip to Connecticut. This time, instead of anger and betrayal, there was just exhaustion and strange sense of completion. "Do you think this counts as justice?" Abby asked. "Him ending up like this?" "I think this is consequence," I said. "Justice implies intention and design. This is just biology and fate. The stress we imposed, the guilt he carried, the isolation he created, it all added up. His body gave out under the weight. Poetic. Efficient. Rod Robertson survived the 48 hours. Then a week. Then a month. He regained some consciousness, but, as the doctor predicted, he was severely impaired. He couldn't walk, could barely speak, needed round-the-clock care. Sandra hired nurses and converted the ground floor of their mansion into a medical suite. She visited him every day, talking to him, reading to him, maintaining the fiction that this was still a marriage and not an endurance test. Abby and I visited once a month, more for Sandra than for Rod. He recognized us. His eyes would track our movement, and sometimes he'd make sounds that might have been attempts at words. But mostly he just stared, trapped in a body that no longer obeyed him. Do you think he remembers? Abby asked during one visit, watching her father struggle to lift a spoon to his mouth with his one functioning hand. Remembers trying to kill me? Probably. The doctors said his cognitive function is partially intact, just his ability to express it that's compromised. So he's aware, knows what he lost. Every single day. A year after the stroke, my pharmaceutical company launched our Parkinson's treatment. The success rate had climbed to 81%. We were saving lives, giving people back time with their families, reducing suffering on a scale I'd only dreamed about. At the launch event, I was asked to say a few words. I talked about the importance of using science ethically, about the responsibility we have to heal rather than harm. Abby was in the audience, beaming with pride. Next to her, Sandra sat watching, tears in her eyes. After the event, Sandra approached me. Rod would have been proud, she said, if he could see what you've accomplished. I doubted that, but I smiled politely. Thank you, Sandra. I never understood why he disliked you so much, she continued. You were exactly the kind of man I'd have chosen for Abby. Smart, kind, accomplished in your own right. Some people value different things, I said carefully. She nodded, looking sad. He valued the wrong things. And now, she trailed off, unable to finish. How is he? I asked. The same. The doctors say he could live like this for years. Decades, even. His heart is strong. His body otherwise healthy. Just his brain betrayed him. Just his brain. The organ that had plotted murders and justified them as family preservation. The tool he'd used to poison and manipulate and control. Now, ironically, the source of his downfall. I found something, Sandra said quietly, going through his office papers, trying to organize his affairs. A letter addressed to me, sealed but not sent. I opened it. My pulse quickened. What did it say? It was a confession about things he'd done. Terrible things, Michael. Things I never knew, never suspected. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Was he telling the truth? About Paul, about my first husband, about all of it? I met her eyes. She deserved honesty, at least some version of it. Yes, I said simply. He was telling the truth. She nodded slowly, tears tracking down her cheeks. I thought I knew him. 40 years of marriage. And I didn't know him at all. Sandra. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't try to comfort me. I'm complicit by ignorance. I should have seen, should have questioned, should have known something was wrong. But I was comfortable in my luxury, and I didn't want to look too closely. You're not responsible for his choices. Maybe not. But I'm responsible for mine, and I chose to be willfully blind. She straightened her shoulders. That letter is locked away now. With other papers, I won't show it to anyone, but I wanted you to know I know. And I'm sorry. For everything he did. For everything he tried to do. For my part in enabling him by never asking the hard questions. She walked away before I could respond, leaving me with Abby in the emptying event space. She knows, Abby said. She found a letter. He must have written it after our confrontation, maybe planning to give it to her if things went south. Do you think she'll go to the police? I shook my head. She's protecting the family name the same way Rod did, just without the murder. The scandal would destroy everything she knows. She'll keep his secrets, carry that burden, but she won't expose it. We're all trapped by what he did, Abby said. All of us living in the shadow of his crimes. No, he's trapped. We're just being careful. But sometimes I wondered if there was a difference. 3 years after the stroke, on a cold December morning, I received a call from Sandra. Rod had developed pneumonia. His compromised immune system wasn't fighting it off. The doctors gave him 48 hours, maybe less. We drove to Connecticut one last time. The mansion looked the same from the outside, but inside it had become a hospital. Medical equipment everywhere. The smell of antiseptic and illness permeating the rooms. Rod lay in his hospital bed, his breathing labored and wet. The pneumonia was winning. His eyes were open but unfocused, his skin gray. I wanted you here, Sandra said. He's not conscious anymore. But I don't know what I thought. That maybe he should see his family one more time. Abby approached the bed slowly. She looked down at her father, this man who'd shaped her life in so many ways, most of them damaging. "Goodbye, Dad," she said softly. "I wish you'd been the man I thought you were. I wish you'd chosen love over legacy. But you didn't, and now this is how it ends." She turned away, unable to watch anymore. Sandra took Rod's hand. "I'll stay with him. You two should go." We left them there, the dying man and the wife who'd spent 40 years beside him without ever really knowing him. Rod Robertson died that evening. The news made the local papers. Prominent philanthropist passes away. The obituary listed his accomplishments, his foundation, his surviving family. It made no mention of the people he'd killed, the lives he'd destroyed, the poison he'd wielded like a gentleman's weapon. The funeral was well attended. People spoke of his generosity, his vision, his dedication to family. I listened to them eulogize a man who'd never existed, a fiction Rod had maintained so perfectly that even his death couldn't expose it. At the cemetery, as they lowered his casket into the ground, Abby squeezed my hand. "It's over," she whispered. "Almost," I replied. After the funeral, after the reception, after all the mourners had gone home, I drove to the bank. Using the key I'd kept all these years, I accessed the safety deposit box. Rod's confession was still there, 14 pages of detailed murder, exactly as he'd written it years ago. I read through it one more time, this catalog of calculated evil disguised as family protection. Then, I took it to a private document shredder and fed every page through. The machine ground Rod Robertson's final truth into tiny, irretrievable pieces. "Why?" Abby asked when I told her. "We could still expose him, even dead." "To what end?" "He's gone. The people he hurt are gone. Exposing it now only punishes Sandra, you, and anyone else who carries the Robertson name. Rod Robertson died a respected man, and the truth died with him. Sometimes that's the most justice we can manage. So, he wins. No. He spent his last years helpless and impaired, unable to control anything, watching his daughter pull away from him. He died alone in his head, trapped with his guilt and his failures. That's not winning. Then what is it? I thought about my research, about the lives we'd saved, about the career I'd built and the love Abby and I shared despite everything her father had tried to do. "It's survival," I said. "We survived him. We thrived despite him. And now we get to live our lives without his shadow hanging over us. That's our victory." 6 months later, Abby and I stood in the living room of our brownstone, looking at the positive pregnancy test in her hands. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "What if I'm like him? What if there's something in our family, something that gets passed down?" I pulled her close. "You're nothing like him. You choose love over control every single day. You choose honesty over manipulation. You choose to build people up rather than tear them down. That's not genetic, that's who you are. But what if the baby? We'll raise them to know the difference between right and wrong, to value people over prestige, to understand that family means supporting each other, not controlling each other. They'll be nothing like Rod because they'll be loved unconditionally, not pressured into being someone they're not." She leaned into me, her hand on her stomach. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." 9 months later, our son was born. We named him Paul, after Abby's uncle, the man who deserved better than a poisoner's legacy. Sandra visited often, doting on her grandson with a fierce love tempered by guilt. She never spoke directly about Rod's crimes, but sometimes I'd catch her watching Paul with tears in her eyes, maybe seeing redemption in this new generation. The Robertson Family Foundation continued, funding cancer research under Paul's name. Every year, they awarded grants, funded studies, saved lives. Rod's blood money, laundered through philanthropy, doing actual good despite its poisonous origins. And sometimes, late at night when Paul was sleeping and Abby was beside me, I'd think about that Christmas morning years ago. The phone call, the panic in Rod's voice. The moment everything changed, I'd chosen not to destroy him publicly, but I'd done something arguably more devastating. I'd forced him to live with full awareness of what he'd lost. His daughter's love, his grandson's presence, his own humanity. Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I'd learned revenge is best served as consequence. Natural, inevitable, earned through one's own choices. Rod Robertson chose poison. In the end, his own choices poisoned everything he'd tried to protect. And we, Abby, Paul, we chose life. We chose love. We chose to build something good from the ashes of Rod's toxic legacy. That, I decided, was justice enough. Years later, when Paul asked about his grandfather, I told him the truth. Not all of it, some truths are too heavy for children, but enough. Your grandfather was a complicated man, I said. He valued the wrong things and hurt people because of it. But he also helped create the woman who became your mother, and for that, I'm grateful. Did you like him? Paul asked. No, but I understood him. And understanding someone, really seeing what drives them, is sometimes more powerful than liking them. Paul considered this with the seriousness of his 8 years. Will I be like him? No, Abby said firmly, joining our conversation. Because you're being raised to know that people matter more than appearances. That love matters more than control. That the measure of a man isn't what he owns or who he knows, but how he treats the people around him. Like Dad treats you, Paul said. Abby smiled. Exactly like that. I watched my wife and son together. This family we'd built from the wreckage of Rod's ambitions, and felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the quiet satisfaction of knowing we'd won the only battle that mattered, the battle to live authentically, without poison, without pretense, without the need to control others, to validate ourselves. Rod Robertson had died thinking he'd failed because he hadn't maintained control, but he'd been wrong about what mattered. Success wasn't control. It was connection. It was love freely given and received. It was building something genuine rather than maintaining something fake. And by those measures, I'd succeeded beyond anything Rod could have imagined. The poisoned wine remained my secret, shared only with Abby and locked away in memory. But its lesson lived on in how we chose to live deliberately, ethically, with full awareness that our choices defined us more than our bloodlines or bank accounts ever could. Rod Robertson's legacy was poison. Mine would be healing, and in that difference, in that deliberate choice, was all the victory I'd ever need. The story could have ended in blood or prison or public scandal. Instead, it ended in a Brooklyn brownstone with a child asking about his grandfather and parents choosing honesty over pretty lies. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something so much better than what tried to destroy you that the contrast speaks for itself. I'd spent 3 years being called insufficient by a man who measured worth in dollars and surnames. I'd been targeted for murder because I didn't fit into someone else's vision of acceptable. And now I was a father, a husband, a scientist saving lives. I was building a family on truth and love rather than manipulation and control. I was proving every single day that Rod Robertson's standards were worthless, his methods were monstrous, and his vision of success was nothing but poison in a pretty bottle. He tried to kill me to preserve his idea of family. Instead, I'd survived to create a better one. And that was justice served perfect. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.